Hey YouTube, welcome back to another History Teacher Reacts video with Mr. Terry. Today we are checking out episode 5 of the Haitian Revolution series by Extra History. This episode is titled War of Knives, so this is part 5 of 6 parts, so we're kind of moving towards the end here now on the Haitian Revolution, and I've been learning a lot. I've kind of said before that this is a moment in history that has been very overlooked. And learning more details, and what I'm finding out is it's a lot more complicated than a lot of people think. And I find, as just like a history teacher, somebody studying history, that often the more complicated things are often the ones that are not brushed over, but not emphasized as much in history, because, you know, especially in history education, the things that often get talked about the most are the things that are more easily accessible. It's easy to put on a test and clearly see causes and effects. And there's plenty of that you can get here, but also gets overshadowed with the other revolutions of the era too. So if you are new to the series, definitely check out the previous videos, okay, episodes 1 through 4, and then come back when you're all caught up, and you can join in with learning with me and learning with our community, and hopefully just appreciating more of this revolution, of what it has to offer us as people of the present. So, all right. Okay, let's go ahead and jump back in. So, Port-au-Prince, so that is the capital of Saint-Domingue, now known as Haiti. It's 1796. Let's think context here. French Revolution has gone on now, because 1789 is when the revolution starts. It's out of the Reign of Terror period, which was 1793 to 1794, which saw the highest amount of deaths by execution. The king and queen have been removed from power, and their heads removed from their body by this time. And of course, the Haitian Revolution is in part an extension of the French Revolution that way too. But let's go ahead and just jump back in. But all right, 1796. What do we got?
Port-au-Prince, 1796. The British soldiers come ashore and die. Come ashore and die. One of the largest expeditions to this point in British history. 20,000 men and thousands of German mercenaries disembark. Within 4 months, most are cut down by yellow fever. Back in Britain, troops riot upon the announcement of a deployment to Saint-Domingue. British forces end up hiring 7,000 black mercenaries to fight for them. Some reports will claim that 60% of the British expedition, 15,000 men, will die. And those that make it to the interior of the island find something frightening. The troops of Brigadier General Toussaint Louverture and his ally André Rigaud fighting like professional soldiers. They do, after all, have years of combat experience. But soon, instead of fighting the British, they will fight each other.
Okay. So one of the things about the Haitian Revolution that I've learned is how many factions and groups there are, and keeping them all straight. Even just the social groups, it can be kind of difficult, just because you have these like so many different tiers of people. It's not just like freed people, slave people, because you got like freed white people, freed black people, and then you got slaves, and then you have these foreign groups that are getting involved. Like I said, with the British getting involved. This is the era too where when you have revolutions going on, you'll see third-party foreign nations come in and influence a side to stick it to their old enemies and all this stuff. It's so complicated here, but now you have Toussaint Louverture, who's kind of become kind of the hero of this, as somebody that was like a moderate, but is also training forces and showing military skills. And I'm starting to see more why he's such a large figure with that. And go back to the other videos for a refresher if you don't know what I'm talking about.
With general emancipation declared and the departure of the Spanish, things started to level out for Toussaint. Not calm down necessarily. I mean, he was still fighting. But with the British pinned to the coast and rivals fighting low-intensity conflicts, he could turn to actually governing. He was in control of the North Province, while his ally and rival, André Rigaud, a free person of color who'd long taken part in the group's insurrection, controlled the South. Thus, the colony was essentially divided into 2 rival administrative centers that would ultimately come to blows in what would be known as the War of Knives. But in 1793, the word was consolidation. Finally, Toussaint had a chance to enact his vision for an integrated post-slavery society, one that brought the white, free people of color, and black populations into a peaceful, functioning whole.
You'd think, but we already saw before the war that the freed whites and freed black people, the freed whites wanted nothing to do with that. And instead of unifying with them, right, against kind of the slave revolts, they thought, nah, that was not something they were interested in. So I'd be really surprised if this social experiment of these freed whites, blacks now will work, because when it was far less threatening before, it didn't come to fruition, and would have been far more beneficial for the freed whites to unify with a common front and refuse to do it.
Which would prove difficult. Part of that
Let's go
difficulty
back
was
so we
slavery
get the
society,
context.
one that brought the white, free people of color, and black populations into a peaceful, functioning whole. Which would prove difficult. Part of that difficulty was that Saint-Domingue's economy was dysfunctional by design. France had wanted the colonists to be dependent on France,
Sure.
and had therefore restricted industry to the...
That's the era of, that's what colonialism is designed to do. Remember, the whole idea of having colonies isn't to largely or equally benefit the colony. It's about the imperial nation. They become dependent. That's why usually within colonial rule, you don't allow your colony to do any trade or business with other parts of the world. Which, if you are a producer in that part of the world, that kind of stinks for you, because what if you can get better offers for better trade deals with other nations? And you can't by law. You have to just with the host nation, which also led to a lot of smuggling and piracy and stuff like that, though.
The point that the island was solely focused on producing sugar, coffee, and indigo. It was restricted from making any moves that might make it self-sufficient. In fact, it had to import food to sustain its population. So the only system that worked...
Well, yeah, because you look at the crops that they do make, those are all cash crops. Those are crops that are meant to be sold, not necessarily consumed at home. The sugar, the indigo, and the coffee, those are like export products, right? It's not just self-sufficient stuff. And that's a thing that makes you totally dependent. If you can't even get food from your own land, that kind of enslaves you to that nation, though. So they're going to have to figure out a way to adjust their economy to being one of more self-sufficiency. That's pretty hard, though, because their entire economy has always been built upon trade products. So can they have one here?
Continue producing sugar, coffee, and indigo. But a few problems there. First, the destruction of the plantation infrastructure early in the Revolution meant that major rebuilding would need to take place. Second, many of those plantations still had living owners, many of them refugees, and could not simply be given away under French law. They had to be managed in trust. And finally, no one wanted to go back to doing the same awful work they'd been forced to do when they were enslaved.
Because that's something, too, you'd think, the economy could keep going, and it looks like, I know people were, some of them were proponents of, hey, like, you're not slaves anymore, but we need to still manufacture those products that we made as slaves. The indigo, the cotton, right? The coffee, whatever, and I should start with the sugar, and but a lot of them were like, no, maybe it's just like they want to do something different. But that's what the only thing that made their colony successful. And going back to that stuff, maybe they just felt like there's no way it could go back to that life, even if it's as a freed person. I mean, it's understandable, right?
But Toussaint and Rigaud solved that last
do you
situation
do?
using the same means everyone in this conflict always used: military force. They used troops to force people back onto the plantation.
Jeez, yeah.
Now, this was not slavery. It was forced work. The difference being that the workers were paid, physical punishment was forbidden, and no one's spouse or children were getting sold away. They also had rights and protections as citizens, including the right to legally marry. This is a stain
Some
on
rights,
Toussaint's legacy, as were the violent repressions he unleashed on those who rose against this forced labor program.
So Toussaint Louverture, he sees this. He's like, hey, our economy was built upon the products that were made during slave labor. And yes, now that slaves have been emancipated, that doesn't change what the economic value is of Haiti. And that is the same products, right? So you kind of see both sides. Like, economically, it makes sense, they need to keep doing this. But on the other side, these people don't want to do a lot of the stuff that they had been doing before. And just because of what it meant, what it symbolized was a horrible life before this. But it's like, it's what Toussaint is saying. That's what we have to do this. These are the products we need to do. Like, got to get over that, right?
But in Toussaint's estimation, this, and other autocratic actions he would take, were necessary to guard the freedoms that they had won. He knew that Saint-Domingue, fairly or not, would be seen as a test case for abolitionism, and what happened there would send a message
Sure.
across the world.
This is big. Can a society function post-abolition? Right, it's way before like the United States or something like that. Can you actually make that transition? Yeah, like they're saying, maybe the rest of the world is looking at this because slavery still exists in forms in other parts of the world. And if this crumbles, then it could send a message to future abolitionist movements, both successful or non-successful.
About whether freed slaves could not only be integrated into a wider society, but could build and sustain their own government. If Saint-Domingue collapsed, not only might slavery return, in fact there were big whites in Paris advocating for just that, but opponents would draw the conclusion that abolition had been a mistake. And such a determination would have global consequences.
Yeah.
And Toussaint increasingly believed he was the only one that could secure the revolution and the freedoms they'd won. As he fought the British, his power growing, he began to edge out political rivals, even allies. When one longtime rival rebelled and captured the colony's governor, accusing him of trying to reinstate slavery, Toussaint rescued the man and got named lieutenant governor for the service. During the election for the colony's representatives in France, Toussaint steered his rival to victory so that then they would be forced to live in France, far from his developing power center. He would get himself declared governor general shortly afterward. And in 1798, he started conducting his own diplomacy. He concluded a secret peace with the British, where they would withdraw their troops and naval blockade from Saint-Domingue in exchange for the return of French royalists and a promise that Toussaint would not export the uprising to Barbados. That concluded, he sent a representative to the United States, striking a deal with John Adams so the undeclared naval war between the US and France would not affect trade with Saint-Domingue. Because you see,
So it looks like Toussaint, he's trying to cover all his bases here. Makes sense.
another running theme to think about, and you're keeping track of all of these, right? Was that Saint-Domingue was always a piece in a larger game. The United States was right next door, as was British Barbados, and France supported whatever leader, in their estimation, best served their interests. And that interplay of various powers sponsoring or intervening in the island's affairs will become a major part of Haitian history all the way to present day.
Sure.
In other words, Toussaint was increasingly behaving like the leader of an independent nation, though he did so with the veneer of French support. He was, after all, a brigadier general of the Republic, and would remain so as long as the French upheld their abolition of slavery.
The whole story of Toussaint has always been one where he's playing all these different groups. He's a pretty crafty guy, it looks like, of trying to have his hand in a lot of different things and get support from a lot of people and not ruffle the feathers of too many groups, and seeing as somebody potentially trustworthy and someone you could work with from a bunch of different competing groups. Maybe that's a reason why the Haitian Revolution will be successful as it is at this point, was because you had this more moderate figure that was able to do this.
In fact, Toussaint had essentially ejected the previous governor. Meanwhile, relationships between Toussaint and Rigaud began to sour, partially due to that expelled governor playing political games about which one was higher ranking, and partially due to the fact that they both wanted total control. Soon, Rigaud appealed to France, casting himself as the loyal revolutionary, and Toussaint as a dictatorial usurper who wanted independence.
But do they
Toussaint,
care?
by contrast, began claiming that Rigaud planned to reimpose slavery. A slender Rigaud turned back on him. Of course, neither wanted that, but there were factions on both sides willing to believe it. Toussaint had invited back many plantation owners in order to rebuild the economy, so it seemed plausible from that angle. And Rigaud had rebuilt the southern province with a caste system with the free people of color on top. So again, people could imagine it.
Makes sense. They don't want it, but there's definitely elements of the old system that they are both bringing back. So those suspicions are pretty warranted there.
Both leaders had alienated supporters with their forced work policies, and those alienated groups started believing that the other leader would never treat them like that. And both
Grass is always greener on the other side, right? But rarely is.
the other of perpetrating a race war, even though there were representatives of all of the island's groups on both sides. Strip away the rhetoric, though, and this was a struggle between two leaders for supremacy. On June 6, 1799, Rigaud sent 4,000 troops to seize several border towns and negotiate the defection of one of Toussaint's veteran regiments. The act triggered a small uprising in Toussaint's northern territory, and he dodged 2 assassination attempts. In one, Toussaint had his hat shot off and an aide killed. In another, His carriage was peppered with a volley of bullets, though by pure chance, he was not inside. Thus began a civil war that would come to be known as the War of Knives.
So, I mean, this is obviously devastating for Haiti, that once they kind of are getting semi-independent, they're now at war with themselves when they need to be unifying for this. And maybe this is going to piece together a little bit about why Haiti as an independent nation is going to struggle. I mean, it looks like in its early years, it's off to a pretty rough start with infighting when they need to be coming together. But you have power struggles here, and that's looks like that could get them. So we'll see. All right, let's see this actual War of the Knives. What do they mean here?
And it earned that title through blood. Both sides offered no quarter, and prisoners, when taken at all, rarely lasted long. At the outset of the conflict, Rigaud's forces, better trained and equipped, made quick gains against Toussaint. But the northern general had an enormous numerical advantage, and the increasingly open support of the United States. Not only were the Americans shipping Toussaint arms, at times, the United States Navy intervened directly, providing fire support during sieges and blockading ports. The American consul even issued passports to Toussaint's ships, allowing them to pass the blockade when Rigaud's ships could not. And during this vicious fighting, one of Toussaint's commanders rose to prominence, Brigadier General Jacques Dessalines, a former slave who had fought through the revolution and who was known for massacring prisoners and rebels with such vindictiveness that Toussaint censored him for it. Though in fact, it is possible Toussaint actually ordered these reprisal killings, using Dessalines as a willing scapegoat to avoid ruining his carefully crafted image of generosity and kindness.
Something to think about. Is Toussaint not the character we think he is? Because other people took the fall? Interesting.
The war ground to a stalemate. Rigaud besieged and pinned, but Toussaint unwilling to expend the casualties necessary to dislodge him. And then, another commission arrived from France. Yeah, another one, announcing another change in government.
You wonder if at this point, the Haitians are just like, they don't care about France says. Okay, like, we're kind of our own thing now. Stop telling us what to do. We don't really care what you say anymore.
General Napoleon Bonaparte had overthrown the political system and declared himself consul. His message? To reaffirm that in the eyes of France, Toussaint was the leader of Saint-Domingue. The war ended basically overnight, with Toussaint allowing Rigaud to slip away into exile in France.
Once you get Napoleon on your side, you got it. If you're France there. Yeah, I was wondering when at what point they're going to start bringing in the Napoleonic years, because that's potentially going to have a huge impact on Haiti, as he was such an aggressive character for France. And once you get Napoleon, if you're his man, then you've got everything you need.
Which left Toussaint free to invade Santo Domingo, while technically still French, was still administered by the Spanish. He claimed it was to prevent his free citizens from getting kidnapped and sold into slavery there, but it may have actually been a bid to bolster his forces through liberation and control all of the island's ports.
But just imperialism, I mean, the expansion of colony, right? And we're going to get into, it's good that they can protect future potential slaves or people from being enslaved, but you got growing power, want to control this, and I'm sure Napoleon's all about this. He's an imperialist.
Because Napoleon's representatives also brought word of a new constitution, one that rescinded the idea that colonies should have the same laws as France. Instead, they would have special laws, tailored to their unique conditions. In other words, Napoleon planned to bring back slavery. In response, Toussaint wrote his own constitution, his own special laws, stating that Saint-Domingue was a sovereign black state, one that rejected slavery outright, and one where he was governor for life. He all but declared independence, and then prepared for invasion. Special thanks to our educational tier patrons Ahmed Ziad Turk, Joseph Blaine, and Dominic Valenciana.
Okay, I was wondering, what's going to happen there. So, seemed to sour pretty quickly there. Napoleon supporting him, but then also it looks like, wants to return to slavery. So now, once again, people are going to have to fight. So it's like, and if you're looking from the slave perspective, it was against the freed people, and now they're going to have to fight they fought against the foreign groups, right? Like the British. And then now you're going to have to fight the French, right? You're going to have to fight again for independence because, looks like Napoleon wants to revert things back to the old way. So It's like we got one more revolution inside of a revolution to conduct here. So we'll see. We'll see. I think what we'll be able to see here is how seriously is Napoleon going to take Haiti, especially in the context of their larger his imperial ambitions in Europe, which I definitely think was going to prioritize was the actions in Europe. Can he dually be fighting for colonial possessions abroad while at the same time dealing with his ambitions in Europe and coalitions of nations there? Obviously, it would be very hard to do. So we'll see kind of how that unfolds there. All right, awesome. So overall, able to see that again at a time when it looked like Haiti was making some progress. The slaves are emancipated, but still, just after all, are still having failures to unify both the freed people and the previously freed people that we've seen consistently with the other episodes of freed whites, freed blacks having a hard time working with each other. But then now freed slave groups are joining factions between Toussaint and other groups, and then they're fighting each other, right? It's like there is no unity here happening at a time when it looks like Haiti needs it the most. And that's pretty shaky grounds to start your new nation on, and it looks like that's what Toussaint's trying to do here is control the whole island and become a unified freed state. But looks like they're gonna have to earn that. They're gonna have to earn that by getting the French off their back. We'll see how that goes. Okay. All right. Well, excellent. Once again, glad to continue on the series. Looks like there is one more episode left. We'll try to get to that soon, number 6. So stay tuned for that. Hopefully you're enjoying this series. I know I am. It's been very educational for me. All right. With that, if you like this original video, make sure you go down below and click the original video link that's in the description. And give them a like, a subscribe, a view. It's really important that you guys do that, okay? Sub to their channel. They do awesome stuff. Great series there. And then if you haven't subbed to my channel, I'd love to have you be a regular and come join us in our community. A good way to interact with our community also is to join our Discord server. We got a link down below that you can come join the thousands of people that we have there to talk about all kinds of history subjects. So that would be awesome as well. Special thanks to all the Patreon pledgers and people that have been supporting the channel through Patreon or through our live stream super chats and all that. Thanks a lot for supporting the channel and supporting history education in general. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and call it here, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.